Well, George Floyd's family will be in D.C. today as the president hosts them at the White House on the one-year mark of his murder. As police reform stalls on national level, we've seen many bills signed locally. Joining us now for an honest discussion is criminal defense attorney Lakai Vinson and UMD African American Studies senior lecturer Jason Nichols. Good morning to both of you. Thank you for joining me.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
I want to start with the bigger picture here before we get to what's going on Capitol Hill. We've seen calls, right, for more police training to do away with qualified immunity, body cameras be implemented, mental health response teams, etc. Do you feel like this is going to make a difference? Do you feel like there has even been enough change in the 1 year since George Floyd was murdered in Minneapolis? Lakai, I'll start with you.
Thank you. So I certainly think that George Floyd's murder has opened up conversations, and now we're asking whether or not there's been the social and justice reckoning that we want to see both at the state level and the federal level. So I certainly believe it's prompted conversations, but I don't think that enough has been done. As you stated, we need to talk about this all over. We need to make sure that federal law is implemented to make sure that we're protecting African Americans who are disproportionately killed by police officers year after year. And we've seen it happen after George Floyd with Daunte Wright and Andrew Brown Jr. and Ronald Green. So we certainly believe that there is still more to be done. We're just at the beginning stages.
Jason, same question to you. And is it realistic, right, to want that kind of change in just within one generation?
Well, I think we're going to need a major cultural shift in order to make those kinds of changes. I think we can change the policy right now. That's something that can happen immediately. That would help all of us, would hold people accountable who do wrong and who commit crimes, whether they're wearing a badge or whether they're wearing a hoodie or whatever it is that they have on. Anybody who commits a crime needs to be held accountable. But at the same time, in order to change these things, these stereotypes that we have about certain people, about African Americans and other people of color that have led to a lot of criminal behavior by law enforcement, I don't think that that's necessarily going to change. And I think your other guest made a good point about conversations, but you know, I'm old enough to remember 1992, and we were having very much the same conversation with the very same things about cameras and all of these situations back with Rodney King. And so I believe that we need to move beyond conversations, move towards action, and then start to make a serious cultural shift where we don't look at certain human beings as different than others.
Speaking of action, the president hoped that the George Floyd Justice and Police Act would be signed into law by the one-year anniversary of his murder. That has not happened. It is stalled in the Senate. Qualified immunity seems to be a sticking point here among several others. Lakai, I'll go to you, given your background. Do you think it is a compromise that's worth making to say, okay, you know what, we'll keep qualified immunity? Or is that going to be a big point here?
That's a good question, and there certainly should not be a sacrifice with qualified immunity. When it comes to African Americans, there is a lack of accountability and transparency when it comes to police departments, and this is just another example of that. African Americans, and no group for that matter, should not be allowed the opportunity to receive the justice that they deserve, and part of that is making sure that qualified immunity is a part of the conversation, so that if officers are committing wrongdoing, not only are they accountable to each other and the blue wall of silence comes down, but certainly there's the opportunity for them to pursue officers in the court of law. So certainly qualified immunity should not be one of those things that's sacrificed as it relates to moving forward with federal law, but we understand that that may be part of it in order to move the George Floyd Act forward.
Jason, I want to go to you as an African American studies professor, your take on this. We know that one of the things that's holding up this bill, another thing, is some lawmakers want buy-in from law enforcement, and they want to be able, in fact, in Montgomery County, the police union is suing the city because there was not that working together for policy change. There are some critics who say that law enforcement will not want to buy in because the system itself needs to be completely reformed given its history. Do you believe it's possible that you can get both sides to work on something, an effective change, essentially?
Well, I've met many police executives who actually want substantive reforms. They want the trust of the communities that they police. So I think that there are police officers and police executives across the country who really sincerely want reform and really sincerely want good relationships with communities of color because it makes their jobs easier and because it's the right thing to do. Will they get wholesale buy-in, particularly from some of these police unions? I don't think so. But there are many police officers across the country, and I've met some right here, in my state, in Maryland, who really want police reform, who really want all of these things, who even want an end to Leobor and some of the things that keep accountability away from police officers. And I'll just add one other thing that, just to piggyback off what your other guest said, is that with qualified immunity, we're looking at a city like Chicago where they spent in 2018 $113 million of taxpayer money to settle complaints and of excessive force and to pay legal fees for police officers.
Yeah.
That should not be placed upon citizens. That should come out of police pensions. That should come out of their pockets and not mine.
We'll have to see if those in the Senate can work something out. But there have been police officers, even in the George Floyd trial, who spoke out, the police chief and others who spoke out. We'll see if some compromise can be reached. Criminal defense attorney Lakai Vinson and UMD African American Studies professor Jason Nichols, appreciate your time and insight this morning. Thank you.